I want to go to Noa Tishby, who's waiting for us patiently. She's a wonderful guest to have, and we're delighted to have her. There she is. Noa, great to see you as always. I wish we could have you on happier circumstances, and I know one day that we will. But this is yet again a horrific act of terrorism, anti-Semitism. We saw a synagogue which was firebombed in Melbourne. Noa, you know Melbourne well. You may well have been to this particular synagogue, the Adass synagogue. Josh Frydenberg has come out and he said that this is an act of terrorism. The Prime Minister of Australia has been as mealy-mouthed and pathetic as you can possibly be. I will actually be talking about that more later in the show, his response to that. But wanted to ask you, Noa, you're on the other side of the world. You know Australia well, but you're in the unique position of having been an ambassador for anti-Semitism, or an envoy rather, on anti-Semitism. So Noa spent several years travelling the world, talking about anti-Semitism, and this was before October 7th. So Noa was out there warning of how this insidious kind of anti-Israeli propaganda that's been going around the world. Noa was out there for 2 years talking, Rita, about how this could only lead to very bad things. Noa could not have foreseen the horrors of October 7th, but since then, it's just got so much worse, Rita.
Absolutely, and I actually did an event with Noa shortly before October 7, and incredibly, she knew then how bad things were on university campuses, because the main focus of her speech and what the message she was giving to the Jewish community in Melbourne was, you've got to speak with your kids. Do not send them to university unprepared for the hostility, the hate, the absolute propaganda, anti-Israel propaganda they're going to be facing. So make sure you understand what it is like in academia and just how
that was before October 7th.
And then we've seen the campus protests.
Noa, I was just saying how we always seem to be speaking in these ghastly circumstances, and that one day we will speak in better circumstances. But your take, both as someone who knows Australia well, probably knows that synagogue well, and looking from outside Australia's, the anti-Semitism that now appears rife in Australia. What are your thoughts, Noa Tishby? You've warned about it. What do you think now?
Well, I think that what we have said is about to hit the world is hitting the world. I'm getting reports from my friends in Australia, from the Jewish community in Australia, that they no longer feel safe there. And this is something that started trickling down and started coming out right before October 7th. And obviously on October 8th, it became very clear that anti-Zionism, this seething hate towards Israel, is just another form of anti-Semitism. We have to understand that the firebombing in Melbourne, the school shooting in California, the pogrom in Amsterdam, and October 7th, they're not isolated events. These are all linked to the same thing. It's this new form of anti-Semitism, of Jewish hate that is manifesting itself as anti-Israel rhetoric. And I believe that your former treasurer is exactly right about what he's saying, calling this what it is. This is not some act of arson. This is not some act of violence. This is an anti-Semitic terrorist attack, and it needs to be investigated as such, and the perpetrators must be brought to justice. Because when anti-Semitism hits a society, this is a sign for something worse that's happening in society. It's not just threatening the Jewish community or the state of Israel. It's literally Western values as we know it.
Rita.
Well, absolutely. We know this because the hostility is towards Australia. We've seen that in the US with those campus protests where they hate America, they burn American flags. How do you see our government's response to what's happened in Australia since October 7 and the UN votes we've participated in, the manner in which the leadership has responded to some of these protests and acts of violence?
Well, lukewarm response at best and appalling as a whole. I think that not calling this attack what it is absolutely appalling. And I think that when you see the Australian government supporting UN resolutions that are saying that Israel is committing acts of genocide and it's horrible. It's a trickle down effect that this UN resolution has for the larger Australian public. The Australian government is signaling that it's okay. It's okay to judge Israel by different standards that you judge any other country. This is what the audience need to understand. This is what everybody needs to understand. Israel is the one that is constantly fighting for its survival. Israel is the one that was attacked on October 7th. And it feels like people are saying, yeah, sure, Israel can defend itself, but not too well. So if you fight too well. This is very uncomfortable for people. And this must stop, because what it does is it just fuels age-old hate that we all know very well. And when we see synagogues in Melbourne being burnt, when we see Torah scrolls, when we see ancient scriptures that cannot be retrieved, we all know where this can lead to. We have seen these images before.
Now, I just quickly want to ask you specifically about those UN resolutions on behalf of Australia. Australia's changed its vote, despite the Albanese government saying that they would stick to the bipartisan agreements of the past. Now, what specifically, because the accusation is made by Benjamin Netanyahu, I would agree with it, I'm sure Josh Frydenberg and others agree with it, that those UN votes in particular fuel anti-Semitism. Now, can you explain what specifically, because Australians go, oh yeah, it's some vote about something or other, land, yeah, whatever, this moral equivalence thing. But what is it specifically about those votes, Noa, that goes directly, leads to the torching of scrolls and synagogues?
Well, this is a very long answer, but the thing to understand is this. First of all, what does that mean to free Palestine? What does that mean, give them land? What does that mean? Israel had tried that in Gaza. Israel's been out of Gaza since 2005, and we got October 7th in return. I believe that there's somebody on the other side of the Palestinian people. If the Palestinian as a national movement can actually clear out to themselves what it is that they want, we might be able to have a conversation. But right now, the entire Palestinian movement around the world is anti-Israel. It's about destroying the state of Israel and, by proxy, killing Jews. And people around the world are equating Israel with Jews all over the world, and they're looking at them as targets. Now, the thing to understand is this is all Iran's doing. The Islamic Republic of Iran is the one that's coordinating this entire campaign against Israel, against Western values, against the modern Sunni countries in the region, in the Middle East. And sadly, what we're seeing right now is that Iran has more friends on college campuses in America than it does in the region. Because what Israel did is get rid of these entities like Hezbollah and fighting against the Houthis and cleaning out Hamas, which are the radical jihadists, elements in the Middle East that are the hindrance for peace. So this should not be taken out on Israel or the Jewish people around the world at all. All of this anger should be pointing out to the jihadists of Iran. Sadly, they're being supported by U.S. campuses.
James.
Just quickly, Noa, it's interesting, hours before this synagogue was set ablaze, your Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, specifically called out the Australian government, warning that their policies in the UN would lead to riots against Jews and worse. Then, of course, we got exactly that. How unusual is it for Benjamin Netanyahu to specifically call out a particular country? Certainly, he's never said anything like that about Australia before. Tell us what that means for relationship between the two countries.
I'm not entirely sure. This is definitely unique that he called out Australia like that. I'm sure he has his reasons as to what to do, as to why he did that. But I got to say, what he said was not unique. We know that this is how it works. We know that these resolutions against Israel, we know that this hatred towards Israel, we know that this disproportionate obsession towards Israel, we know these throwing out these sentences like free Palestine and give them land and occupying country and ethnic cleansing and genocide. We know that these words lead to Jew hatred all over the world. We know these words lead to riots, and they lead to anger, and they lead to violence against Jews. So when he said this wasn't something that was unique or special. He just knows his history. This is what happened in the past, and sadly, it happened very quickly in Melbourne, very quickly.
Well, Noa Tishby, great to chat to you as always. I'm sorry again that it's under such horrible circumstances, but I believe we firmly need a change of government. We need a new approach, and Australian Jews need to know that the rest of Australia is behind them and supports them and will not tolerate this at all. Noa, great to chat to you, and hope we see you out in Australia before too long.